with those assumptions. Some quick examples, because for me it's always about the characters and the stories. I've been living with them for 20 years. I think it's somebody else's turn to entertain these people in their heads, so I've got to start talking about them instead of the generalities. And Amel is my, it mixes up two tropes. One is the prostitute with the heart of gold, but he's a guy, so there's already, okay, we sort of know what this is about, but oh, how does that work if he's male, and what culture could he be in which being a male courtesan and not gay would work, and hence the Frelish women, right? But the other one is that he's the prince raised as a pauper. So he's the prince raised as a pauper who winds up being a prostitute with a heart of gold in the court where he's supposed to have been the king, basically. So that gives you a different twist on that whole story. It takes him about 6 books to live it down. And it doesn't help that he's a very nice person, so he gets pushed around and hurt quite a bit. But he eventually rises above it all, so there's a trajectory there. And then Horth Nursel, who's the sort of secondary start, he's the book 2 starts him, book 1 starts Amel. And Horth is the Lancelot character. I was always fascinated by the Arthur stuff, and I have a kind of an Amaron in my story. King Arthur in Amaron, or sort of, this is my head, things are rearranged inappropriately. Amaron is like the King Arthur character, but there isn't, the Lancelot Guinevere thing doesn't happen. Horth becomes his sort of Lancelot, but without the love triangle. Horth's love problems are in another dimension, which don't happen until book 7, by which time he's sired 100 children. So he's, as he's Vrelish, it's your duty. If you're a Vrelish liege, it's your job. So there's differences in my ideas of what it means to be Vrelish versus Danish versus Laurel or Rishan. Those are all my own constructions, but they start from some sort of inspiration from my own cultural past and history, but then I go, okay, but what if there isn't a love triangle? What if there's something else, like Horth has a verbal disability? So he's a spatial genius who is in a military way and trumps in his culture, but he has trouble understanding language, and that's a real problem for him because he grows up in a family where misunderstandings or differences of opinion about theology ultimately wind up in half of the family getting killed on one day, and he does some of the killing. So it's really important to understand what the differences are in your family members as you're getting into this civil war situation. So having a verbal disability is a big problem for him. So I've combined Lancelot with verbally disabled challenged person like Helen Keller or something. So Horth is unique, but he's combining two different kind of tropes of overcoming a disability and being a genius in some areas.
I'm really careful with using tropes in main characters, because main characters have to feel absolutely real, and you have to be really careful because people are very good at recognizing patterns. That your characters aren't. I know talking to you, that you're not doing this, but you have to be careful that they can't recognize the trope too. If you say, "Oh, look, it's the young wizard going to school," then you're not doing your job right as a writer. Now, okay, J.K. Rowling's fine, you know, but if I were to write one now, that's a trope that everybody now recognizes. So I'd have to do something else with it. You can start there if you want to, but by the time they're with that character for a couple pages, this person has to be a person just like their best friend is a person. It's the side characters that really benefit from the use of tropes, just as it's when you're describing places. You know, if I talk about a Victorian house, all of you have in your head a picture of a Victorian house. It's not the same Victorian house as I do, but it works, and that gives us room to play with the story, instead of describe, and instead of telling you what you should know already about things. A lot of things as a writer, I know about the situation. I don't tell you, I never put it in, I just show you. And I don't have to, you know, I don't have to say this is a war-torn country if all I do is, if I show you that it's war-torn. And eventually it'll come out whatever happens. Christopher Buehlman wrote a wonderful book called Those Across the River not too long ago. Have anybody read it? Okay, I highly recommend it. At the first 10 pages of the book, he never ever tells you that this is a historical book. But you can't read the first 10 pages without understanding it's in the 1920s. And it's amazing. It's without using all of the usual tropes that we use to indicate that. So there's no, commercials for Beam and Gum or whatever else it is. They're not driving a 1921 Model T. All of those things are it's all in the conversation between this guy and his mistress. And it's the way that they treat each other. You just absolutely know there was nowhere else that this could be other than the American South in the 1920s. It's amazing. It's called Those Across the River. It's a horror novel. And I don't know him, so I'm not picking my friends. This is just a really amazing bit of writing.
You can see that in books that are written in a particular period when they're contemporary. And then you go back and you read them. I was thinking when you're talking about that, about Cry the Beloved Country, which is so clearly set in a place and time. And the writer is living in that place and time. It's about the apartheid situation in South Africa. And so you just are living that place and time, and that's another example of building it out. I knew my universe really, really well before I got started, and I have boxes and boxes of me gaming the universe, trying out different things and exploring different avenues. And so I had a pretty good idea about a pretty complex. I've actually got a book, The Encyclopedic Guide to the Okawat Universe. So when I went to try and start writing it, I had to be very careful about making sure that, because some of the patterns that were familiar in my universe were not patterns that were familiar in the world, I had to make sure that I was looking for things that would give people a sense of, okay, I know where I am and what's going on, and be comfortable with that, and then discover, oh, no, that's not quite what's going on. For example, there's a scene in which a Demish character, Regency romance kind of thing, is talking to a Frelish character about a woman being raped, and the Demish character is going, oh, I didn't know that, that's terrible. And the Frelish one goes, yeah, I tried to teach her how to fight, but she just really never learned. So from their point of view, it's not the same type of thing as it is from the Demish point of view. So that is contrary to our assumptions about how people would view that act. And you have to build it in as an argument or something. You have to have some character representing the more normal interpretation in order to have the other interpretation contrasted somehow. So contrast is a good, having people with different points of view is a good way, I think, to try and illustrate the things that are counter to the expected pattern, because they're truly strange. You think in science fiction, something that's a bit strange would be easy to accept. But I think actually there's very little of the truly strange in anyone's work. And if things are physically truly strange, like Hal Clements, the patterns of human behavior are very simple. Like his stories, he's an older sci-fi writer of the 50s or 60s, but he was a chemist and he wrote about biology in a way that was completely alien. So he actually designed species that were completely different. But in terms of the emotional character interactions, the characters were pretty much like Boy Scout. You could recognize them as 1950 characters off Leave It to Beaver in terms of their patterns of interaction. So the one strange thing was carried through by the other parts of the story being recognizable. And I think if you're going to do something quite different and mash things up a bit, you do have to have some threads of the common. Like Shakespeare, when he did Hamlet, the revenge play was an established core thing. It was sort of like a sitcom, let's go and see a revenge play today. It was the standard of the time for playwrights to tackle. But he did something with it that used that vehicle and took it to a whole new level.
Using readers' expectations against them is really fun. So you set them, and it's fun for the readers too, okay? So you set them up expecting one thing and you can deliver something else, and then we both have a better time together. But the setup has to be really good, and as a writer, you can never lie to your readers. You can never tell them they're going to get something, and then so for instance, a really good book I really, really like, and you're in the viewpoints, the main character's viewpoint really, really strongly, and then you find out about 100 pages earlier that he actually knew what was going on and just didn't communicate it to the readers, and I was really upset. really, really upsets. You can't lie to your readers like that. You can't have a protagonist who knows what's going on is pretending to the readers to not know what's going on. Because to the readers, you always have to be the most honest. You can lie to other characters, your characters can lie to other characters, but readers have to feel like they can trust you. And then they'll take that funny little leap that's a little bit off.